And welcome, Caitlin. How are you doing today, this evening? I don't know, whatever we want to call it. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm not too bad. I had kind of a sweaty afternoon. I had to go with my coworker and I. We went on a little walk, taking a little break, and then we stopped and came across a woman that asked us for help. I don't know how I get into these situations, but yes, asked us for help. She blew a tire. And then so we both helped her try to get like the tire off, but it turned out one of the lug nuts was stripped. And yeah, and
Oh,
then had to call another guy to come bring us a different tire iron. And you know, he was like, "You work a desk job. Why are you so sweaty?" I'm like, "Long story." But anyway, so it's been a weird day. Been a weird, strange day. But speaking of getting sweaty, how much can you bench? That's the real. I know you
well,
worked out a lot, right?
to be honest, well now you got me on something that I really enjoy talking about. I
Yeah.
actually just hit a goal this year, as a matter
Oh
of
yeah.
fact, for body weight bench. So that's where we're at. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I was pretty impressed with you had a little video where you're doing deadlifts, which has got to be my most hated exercise whatsoever. I have a home gym and I work out semi regularly. I'm trying to get back into the swing of things after being just kind of off this year. But yeah, I'm not a big deadlift guy. It just, I think it's my knees really, because I'm old enough that they crackle no matter what I do. And it helps to have AirPods in, so that way I just don't hear
You
the
can't hear it.
crackle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
No,
can't.
can't
Yeah,
hear
so
the groaning of your body protesting.
yeah, so and I was like, "Damn, girl, you know, you, I'm not worthy." Is all I'm saying. Very, so because you do a lot of exercise, right? A lot of lifting, and
I have been lifting for 10 years now.
10 years.
And I that's the personal passion that kind of turned into a part-time job. So
Oh,
I
really?
coach
Yeah.
group fitness
Oh, that's cool.
part-time. Yeah, in addition to just my regular life, which,
Yeah.
I have a spouse and 4 kids, and
Oh, four
got a
kids.
dog
Wow.
and a cat. So we've got a full
Yep.
house.
You got a full house. Are you certified in like what's the there's two certification bodies, I
Yeah.
think, for
So NASM, I had I held their CPT. So long story short, I let that lapse during COVID because that's what I was
hmm
doing during COVID, was personal training. And
yeah.
after that all happened, it became so uncertain that I was like, well, what if we just kind of don't do fitness anymore in person? So, and not all bad, but
Yeah.
I'm still able to do that in some capacity. Just yeah,
Yeah.
without that.
The funny thing about COVID is that I expected the apocalypse to be a lot more dramatic, and instead people were out walking. Like at the beginning, it was like it was either you were walking or you were baking something. That's I feel
Mm-hmm.
like those were the two
Mm-hmm.
big things, and maybe those kind of go hand in hand,
Or taking up
but
crocheting. I feel like a lot of people started doing
oh yeah,
like
oh
needlework. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, funny thing is, like, I got a lot of my gym equipment for my home gym after COVID because people had
Mm-hmm.
started returning to work and they were starting to offload their stuff. I got some great deals. I mean, I furnished a whole home gym for less than $1,000. I mean, squat rack and plates and stuff like that. So I was like, this worked out for me. So anyway, well, that's the good stuff, and I'm glad we have good things to focus on, but we're not here to talk about good things today. We're here to talk about bad things. I don't necessarily want to make it bad, but I am interested in hearing your story, and we talked a little bit online, and so yeah, why don't we just go back to the beginning? You were uh, tell me about like how you're raised and what life was like just growing up.
Oh boy. So, um, you know, it's interesting because when I look back at like my earliest childhood memories, and granted, there's a lot of, I tell people all the time, like I have memory loss from my childhood.
Oh yeah.
Um, but what I do remember from my earliest childhood was, we kind of had a normal life at some point. My parents were not always a part of a church community, in fact. So my parents, ended up in the church. They were they were made to attend marriage counseling,
Hmm.
in order for the pastor, who they had asked to marry them.
Yeah.
And so they ended up in premarital counseling, and that's how they kind of stumbled on the church. Prior to that, they were not religious people at all.
And we should probably say what church was it then? Was it the same one, or was it a
No,
different
so
church? No.
yeah, this was even, I want to say it was an Assemblies of God church.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is off base for where we ended up.
Right. Got it.
Um, so yeah, they ended up being married by a pastor from an Assemblies of God church who had married somebody else that they knew, and this particular pastor was just like, "Hey, if you want me to marry you, you have to attend premarital counseling. That's just how I do things." So
Sure.
they attended that, and they ended up, I guess, getting some benefit from that and enjoying it. So that kind of started them on this curiosity about, oh, well, that was actually a good experience for us. So maybe we should start attending church. And of course, this was before they had kids, but they started having children almost immediately, after they got married. So I think it was about like when my two oldest sisters, probably were toddlers, that they started attending church kind of semi regularly. Um, and then started adding more kids to the family. So I'm fourth. I'm fourth in line of 11.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of
Yeah.
hand-me-downs. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yes. Oh yes.
Yes.
Uh, so, but their trajectory from that to then we ended up in the church that I grew up in. And I couldn't even tell you now how they ended up finding this church. I'm sure that it was on a recommendation of a friend that they had met in another congregation. But basically, they were just like told at one point, oh, hey, y'all really have to come check out this church. It's close to where you guys are living right now. Because at the time we lived in a small town, about, 45 minutes south of Gainesville.
Okay.
Um, Teeny tiny town. There's really nothing there. But about 15, 20 minutes down the road, there was this church, and we knew people that went there. So my parents started attending this. It was a reformed Reformed Baptist church. It seemed pretty innocuous
Right.
if you're just looking at the mark.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds okay, right?
It
It's got the
right.
word reform in it. I don't know
Yeah.
what we're reforming
So
to or
there's
from. So yeah.
correct. Right. Yeah. So it's this little Reformed Baptist church. That actually, I mean, and this church, now the way that I would describe this church is it was very much high control. And the reformed part, they had a lot of like they basically kind of borrowed some of the reformed theology from like what we might recognize as maybe like Calvinism,
Hmm.
something more adjacent to what you would find in a typical, reformed Presbyterian church. But then uh, one unique thing about this church was that they heavily subscribed to quiverful movement. And if you're not familiar with that, are you familiar with quiverful?
So I only know of it in passing, but I know the scripture. Okay, I know about the blessing of having a quiver full of children is what it comes down to, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, 4 kids sounds kind of low, really, for quiverful type of thinking. I don't know how many arrows can you get in a quiver. I'm not real sure, but yeah, I mean, how you go ahead, elaborate more. Tell
So
me what it was like. Lots of people with lots of kids.
people with lots of kids.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so this this church though, so this was actually the place where we knew several families that we became close with once we started attending this church. And it really didn't take long for my parents to kind of get sucked in, because on the surface, all of these people are very kind. They're very
Hmm.
kind. They're very welcoming. Um, and they really did a good job of kind of taking my parents under their wing.
Yeah.
Which is the way I think that a lot of these groups function is, they take in people who are vulnerable. They take in people who are maybe newer to any sort of Christianity. And then they kind of just, I don't know how to describe it other than sinking their hooks into somebody.
Yeah.
And then you kind of start to see cracks in the facade where now um now you're becoming privy, especially the structure of this church was very patriarchal. Like there were no female pastors, no female leaders. It was completely antithetical to what they said was biblical. Women were not allowed to speak, in the congregation, at any time unless it was like a prayer request. And then women could,
Were the women
could be
required to
allowed.
wear anything on their heads by chance?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I've been to one
Yes.
of those types of churches once. I visited a long time ago, before I was even married. So I don't know, they came by and stuck a little thing on the door like, "Hey, we have church service." And I'm like, "Yeah, maybe I should get back into church." Because I'd moved to a new city and I didn't really know anybody, and one of those things, right? Like you don't, it's community and it's somewhere you can
Mm-hmm.
go and hang out
Right.
with people. And so
Right.
I go and yeah, just talking to people before the church service starts is not a big deal. But then whenever the service started, they all put on these little what I would call like white doilies on top of
Yes,
their
no big
heads,
darlies.
and they didn't say anything, and I was like, oh no, what have I done,
Mm-hmm.
so I just knew that wasn't for me, but
Yeah.
sounds like you were in it at that time, not really, not like you had a choice, right? Mom and dad were going, so you're,
No.
yeah.
Yeah. No. So I mean,
Yeah.
because we started going to that church when, gosh, I was probably 2.
Hmm.
Um, and so pretty quickly after we arrived, oh well, let me talk about the dress first, and then we'll get back
Okay.
into it. But so the way that women were supposed to dress, and again, this is very very patriarchal, very very legalistic as far as how they're requiring people to dress. There wasn't a dress code per se, and they would
Hmm.
say that, oh, everybody's welcome here, everybody's welcome here, but they didn't really mean that, because if there was a woman, and on occasion we had, of course, on our Christmas or Easter services, we would have people bring family members, and sometimes people would bring female family members, and, maybe they were wearing a blouse that was low cut, that didn't cover, their clavicles or something
Yeah.
like that. And it was just this
Oh, clavicles
scandalous,
are so sexy.
they really are. I
They
mean,
really are. Yeah.
they're just driving brothers to sin.
Yeah.
Um, but so what women typically wore were dresses down to their ankles. Not at all form fitting. They had to be very loose. A lot of these women, what I would describe as like a jumper, like these very
Yeah.
loose, ill-fitting dresses. A lot of them denim, because if you're growing up in the
Hmm.
90s, like that was just the uniform. Completely covered, shoulders could not be exposed. That was absolutely scandalous. You couldn't have anything drawing attention to your chest, in particular. We even had it on one occasion as we got older and started wearing, like uh, mid-length skirts. Like we're talking, the skirt still goes below your knees. We even had women coming up to our father at some point when we were teenagers. I couldn't have been more than 10 or 12, and people are like, "Oh, their legs are causing my husband to stumble. My husband is very distracted by your teenage daughter." Like, gross. But I digress. But yes, head coverings in the sanctuary during service, because women had to cover themselves. It was considered, utmost modesty for you to, show proper respect to God, and your male head, right? So your
Hmm.
father or your whoever
Right.
your male head was, to have your hair covered. Um, Very little jewelry, usually no makeup. If people did wear makeup and jewelry, it was, oh, sister, are you becoming a Jezebel, sister?
Wow.
Are you
Makeup and
are
jewelry, huh?
you are you you seem to be trying to distract your brothers in Christ with your face. So
Right.
that very very much very legalistic. Um and again, just very very focused on um how men are thinking about, how men are thinking about our bodies and faces, not really anything to do with, biblical modesty.
How'd the men dress? Just
However they
pants and
wanted to.
yeah, however they wanted to. Yeah. I
Pretty
mean,
much.
could you come in with a cut off t-shirt and
I mean,
and
well, no,
sleeveless
no.
and, right. Yeah. So
Although we did complain, on trips where we had mixed groups of people, sometimes because we lived near springs in Florida. Obviously, the springs are world renowned, beautiful. We would take trips and things like that. And of course, we had a big kerfuffle one time because the boys were going swimming in just their trunks and no t-shirts, and that was fine. But then the girls had to wear what we called culottes. I don't know if you've ever seen culottes in the
Yeah, I
wild.
know what a
Those,
culotte is.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like the
Hmm.
gaucho pants. Okay, so we had to wear those with like t-shirts that fully covered everything. And of course, uh, we weren't dumb. Even as young kids, we knew that there was a double standard there, right?
Right.
So, there was a little bit of drama over that at some point, and then, everybody just basically was like, "Oh, fine. Well, we'll appease the girls and we'll make the boys wear t-shirts, when they're swimming."
Some guys really should wear t-shirts. I'm just saying. I
I
mean,
mean, yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah.
maybe. But maybe for skin cancer reasons. Yeah, that's what we're
I
gonna
mean,
say.
if nothing else,
If
yes.
nothing else, it's not a bad idea. I mean, my son is skinny as can be and small, and he wears a swimming shirt all the time, mainly for I think just protection because he is pretty fair skinned, burns
Yeah.
easy, so that happens. Okay, so well, that sucks. What? had, ha, do you remember how you felt about that at that time? I mean, yeah, you just alluded, like you weren't stupid, but like, were you? Do you remember if you were whenever you were that young, if you thought, I really don't care for the fact that it's such a double standard? Or is it one of those things that it pops in your head and then it goes away quickly?
I think at the time we were just so heavily encouraged to not ask questions. And,
Hmm.
and for two things, because I think that, my parents were still relatively new to that lifestyle.
Yeah.
When we were coming up in it, that a lot of times they just didn't have a good answer for why we should be doing things. Um, except for that piece, because that always kind of came back to, oh, well, do you want to be a biblical woman? Because this is what biblical women do. We cover so that we don't lead our brothers into sin. And, so they kind of parroted the same sorts of talking points that we hear in modesty culture all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Or they just completely shut it down just because I said so. And if you don't accept it, then there was always the fear of punishment.
Hmm.
I think a lot of my siblings and I were just really afraid of our parents a lot.
Yeah. That's I get that. And I mean, there's a lot of that in a lot of Christian denominations, and I'm not well
Hmm.
versed in other religions, but I'm going to guess it's probably the same. Where this fear of, fear your parents because that's like basically like fearing the Lord, and fear is all
Hmm.
about is somehow good. To be afraid of things is somehow
Hmm.
better than to be free thinking, and just like learning to work with others rather than to fear them. So
Oh,
I get it.
absolutely. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
okay. And then, I don't know, let's say, is this, then as you get into your teenage years, how's that work out for you? Like, what's life like?
So teenagers, well, and just a little bit of backstory. So there was actually a fracture in this church over
Okay.
over sexual abuse.
Mm,
So there were multiple victims involved. I do not recall all of the details, and I'll be damned if I ever talk to my dad about it because I don't, first of all, I don't talk to the man anymore. We
oh,
are low or no contact at this point.
mm-hmm,
Um, but basically, what ended up happening was there were several girls involved in this that were victim of sexual abuse by perpetrated by a teenager in the
mm,
congregation. And basically, how that ended up shaking out is that there were some parents who wanted to take it to the police, and then there were other parents who were like, "No, we don't want to ruin his life." And he was adopted, and he was adopted from a different country. So they're like, "Oh, well, no, if you tell the police, they'll deport him and blah blah blah." So there was all of this kind of maybe things that were not true, and then some fear mongering.
yeah,
But basically, what ended up happening is that the family that was involved, their son was the perpetrator. They ended up leaving the church. And then the rest of us who were kind of left over, basically the parents were they all got together in this kind of meeting and agreed that they were just going to cover it up.
Oh, yeah.
So that caused a pretty huge rift in the church. And I think my friend and I, who became my friend, a couple, years later as we got older, she and I think at the time of the abuse were like maybe 3 years old.
Okay.
So I don't really remember a lot of it. I do remember some of
That's
it, but not a
that's
lot of
probably
it
good.
in detail.
Yeah.
So, and I'm fairly thankful for that at this point.
Yeah.
Because what I do remember is I, let's just say I have PTSD for a reason.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so that caused a pretty big fracture in the church. And then once that happened, obviously for whatever reason, my parents decided to stay. And then, yeah, so we ended up staying, gosh, so we started there when I was about 2 years old. And then going into teenage years, I was, I think I was about 14 when we finally left the church. I was between the ages of 12 and 14 when we finally left the church. So
Okay.
what ended up happening though is, and this is what my parents kind of had to find out the hard way, um, was just that, as they were raising us, of course, I had 3 older siblings at this point. One of my oldest siblings, my oldest sister, they ended up kicking her out of our house, for what they were calling rebellion, but really it was just kind of a consequence of their parenting, of the way that they parented through fear and control.
Too tight, and
Um,
then she
mhm.
said, I'm gonna, yeah.
Right. So she ended up leaving, and yeah, moving in with family, because,
Hmm.
and this is crazy to me now as a parent, that my parents were just like, oh, we'll just kick them out. And it's like, oh, what's the plan? Like they're just going to be homeless and you're okay with
Yeah.
that? So, but that was their plan. They had absolutely no forethought in that. They just were like, oh no, you're a bad influence to the rest of our children and you can't ruin the flock. You have to just
Hmm.
go. Like,
Ruin the flock. Yeah.
so, really, they treated it like, oh no, we just have to cleanse this pariah that's, ruining our perfect family image. And, a lot of it was about projecting this image of this, godly family who has it together. Cause a lot of it really does come down to, what we would describe as, oh, if we allow this child to stay in this home and they're a bad influence and they're reflecting poorly, then they're harming our witness. I've heard that line so many times. Oh, it'll harm our witness. It's like,
Right.
it's the reason for all of these cover-ups, like especially like even going back to that abuse. One of the rationales that I remember being thrown around like years later talking about it with my mom, was that, oh well, it would have really harmed the reputation of the church if we had let it come out. And we just kind of thought, oh well, you guys won't remember because you're too little. And it was like, oh wow, well that was a big gamble, mom.
Yeah. Huge gamble. And it's funny because it's always about the scandal, or basically
Hmm.
what do other people think of us,
Yeah.
rather than what about correction and grace and love and fixing things, not fixing them so no one can find out, but fixing the individual who, yes, you did
Hmm.
something wrong. Let's try to correct the behavior in a loving way, but also not without the consequences that are needed,
Hmm.
right? I think there seems to be way too much emphasis on let's just hide this and maybe it'll go away. And
There is
that's,
a huge accountability problem in the evangelical church. I mean, like there at this point, there's no doubt about it. We've seen the stuff from the SBC with thousands of victims. Like, this is not a secret anymore that evangelicals in particular are struggling with abuse problems.
yes. I consider myself fortunate since I was raised SBC. That's Southern Baptist Church for those who
Yeah.
don't know. But then, as I got older, I just kind of moved. I mean, I moved to a pretty liberal city, college town. So that probably had some allowed me to loosen up a little bit and explore some other things. But obviously, since I went to doily church and decided that that wasn't for me,
Really church.
I but um so okay, so you guys have a little scandal and decide it's too hot to stay, and you bolt out of there. And then what happens after that?
So I think the catalyst for my family leaving is actually pretty interesting because what ended up happening was that, yeah, so as we are growing older and we are, teenagers, and at some point, yeah, I do remember reaching a point where I was finally like old enough to where I knew that my parents were not going to. So up until the point that I would say like between the ages of 10 and 12, my parents spanked us. Like, but when I say spanked us, I mean like these were the types of spankings like where it would sometimes last for hours. They were those kind of parents where they
Oh.
were heavily influenced by people like James Dobson,
Hmm.
um, Michael and Debbie Pearl. They came up with the concept of blanket training where you put your 1-year old or infant on a blanket, put a toy just outside of their grasp, and then if you tell them don't reach for that toy and they reach for the toy anyway, then you're supposed to discipline them, and you're supposed to essentially, one of the things that they talk about is training children like animals.
I have
Like,
not heard of that before. So
well, bless
that
bless you.
wow,
So
blanket training. I
that for
mean,
me even goes further than what James Dobson. But James Dobson's influence obviously is outsized compared to the people like the Pearls. So
yeah.
the harm that he's done to people is just. I mean, I don't even think that we could accurately calculate how many people he's harmed. But
I
the
think the
Pearls were also
online
pretty pervasive.
reaction. I think the online reaction that and you too witnessed the day that Dobson died was nothing short of amazing. Like,
Hmm.
holy shit. I mean, I get it. It's
Yeah,
an algorithm and you're going to see things that you click on, but that was so overwhelming, such a huge trending topic. And
it really
at
was.
some point, I mean, uh, you ever see something and go, man, I hope I'm not remembered by
Oh
something
gosh.
for being so
Yeah.
heinous,
Yeah.
because I mean, I got lucky because I'm probably just happened to be old enough that I only got like maybe some early influence of Dobson. And then as I got older, either mom and dad were too busy or I don't know, it wasn't that strong. And I feel like it was later that he wrote more books, became a lot more influential in the parenting circles, and then you get stuff like this, and then it expands on to other people that also latch on to writing books and
Hmm.
making instructional videos and things of that nature about how to
Hmm.
discipline your children.
No, I mean, really, though. But it's crazy the way that they describe it in a lot of these books that my parents used as resources. I mean, they literally like describe for you, here are implements that you can hit your kids with, that you can get away with, you can avoid detection of CPS. Because that was a
Oh,
huge thing in our
yeah.
circles. In fact, that, you know, we had families at our church that investigated by CPS for one reason or another.
Hmm.
Either just neglect, kids being hungry or kids being dirty,
Hmm.
not having just basic resources. So that was a pretty common thing in that church. Was just pretty. It was pretty rife with abuse and neglect.
Hmm.
But oddly enough, what drove my parents out was, as we got older and we start having more autonomy, and my parents are kind of realizing, oh, like our kids are kind of mad at us. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
resentment that's built up over a period of years. Because at some points, when we were older, it was just kind of like they'd be like, oh, you better listen to me. And it's like, oh, okay, why? What are you going to do? Are you going to try and hit me? Because guess what? Then it was like this, they were, coming across this pushback and they're feeling all of this heat and resentment from their children. And they're just like, where is this coming from? We were
Yeah.
told that if we raised our kids like this, that we would be blessed and they would be a joy to us in our old age and da 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 da. And it's like,
Right.
no, hey, guess what? You can't beat your kids and treat them like shit and then expect them to like you.
Train a child the way he should go, and he will never depart from it. Right?
Yeah.
Isn't it
Oh,
the
they
verse?
loved
So,
that verse so much. They
yeah.
loved it. Yes.
And
Yes.
the thing is, in a twisted way, they meant well, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
the weird
No.
thing.
Yeah. It
They
is
were like,
weird, but yes.
we're trying to not raise rebellious little hellions.
Mm-hmm.
Inadvertently, you may end up raising rebellious little hellions because it's just so painful.
Mm-hmm.
The methods are painful, and they never take into consideration that the children are humans, you
Right.
know. So they become kind of almost like animals, like pets, and
Mm-hmm.
and the kids pick up on that. We all do,
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
oh
Yeah.
goodness. Okay, so what was next?
Well, so somewhere during that time, and it's interesting because, gosh, I'm trying to remember what year it was, and it'll come to me eventually. But at some point during our time in that church, we ended up being exposed to by a family who had joined, kind of in the middle of our time there. Uh, they were conservative, but they were less conservative. They didn't dress to an extreme like some of the people that we, went to church with did.
Yeah,
Certainly, at that time we were a little bit more extreme. And I would say that they kind of had an influence on the church about maybe relaxing some of the unofficial dress code thing, which was interesting. But they ended up uh introducing my parents to Bill Gothard and IBLP. So that's the Institute for Basic Life Principles. And what you got to know about Bill Gothard is this is a man who was never married, never has been married, never had children. Like,
huh.
so this is a single man without children who is writing entire books and homeschool curriculum for families and children. Um, the crux of IBLP is patriarchal authority and
Yeah,
Christian nationalism.
hmm,
So one of the things about IBLP was that they were also affiliated loosely with other organizations um, that were actually training young people to infiltrate politics and government. Um, I want to even say, and don't quote me on this, but Madison Cawthorn was a representative here in North Carolina at one point.
yeah,
And he went to, I believe it was Liberty University, but I found out some years later after I think he was primaried or something like that. I found out that he was actually loosely affiliated with IBLP at some point, which
and
then
you
kind
weren't
of made,
surprised, right?
I
Yeah,
was not surprised. No, because that is the type of person that IBLP was trying to raise is they were
hmm,
raising Christian nationalists to infiltrate bureaucracy, government. They clerked for Supreme Court justices.
hmm,
So now the way that we're seeing policy kind of be shaped in our country, it's interesting to me knowing that a lot of those influences are likely people who came up in similar or adjacent circles
right.
that are now in different ways kind of like directing like American policy. And I'm just,
Huh, I hadn't
so
noticed.
I know how we ended up here, but other people are like, wait, how did this happen? And it's like, we haven't been paying attention collectively to this undercurrent of Christian
Yeah.
nationalism because we've always just said, oh, it's a fringe thing. It's a fringe thing. And it's like, well, it's not now.
Well, and it's been low key and kind of
Yeah,
slow
that's a
moving.
good
It's
word.
been
Yeah.
decades long, where it just
Hmm.
kind of slithers along.
Yep.
Actually, I feel bad for saying that because I feel like the snake got a bad rap in the book. Um, because I think about that sometimes. Like I used to be deathly afraid of snakes, not to derail, but that's what I do. But
Yes.
yes, but like you're afraid of snakes because the Bible, serpent, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I'm like, that's actually kind of interesting if you just
Hmm.
like hang out and learn a little bit about them. But yes, so sorry, snakes, but slither along. It slithers along within at least our culture, and
Hmm.
then 5 or 6 decades later it explodes and we have we have a problem now, so and
Yeah.
it's causing even more problems, and the story's not written yet. We'll have to wait and see how it all turns out. So okay, so you get into so the meet a couple that are into Bill Gothard and the I'm going to get IBLP. So
We ended up attending as a family the basic seminar. So the basic seminar is basically they go through this series of what they call wisdom booklets, which is basically just very detailed prescription for Christian living, according to Bill Gothard and Co. Right?
mhm.
Um, the things that I remember most that stand out to me, particularly now as a woman and a mother, were how much time these booklets spent talking specifically about something that they referred to as eye traps. And this was specifically directed at women.
Is that a new
And
Apple product? No, I'm sorry.
but no, I mean, it sounds like it could be.
Yeah.
No, but eye traps were basically, they showed this picture of a woman. Okay. And this woman had on different things. Like sometimes she had on um, like a little kerchief type thing tied at the top of her blouse. And you were supposed to go through this picture and pick out all the eye traps. So, maybe she was wearing a pencil skirt that was knee length. And then
Mhm.
she had this nicely tied like little kerchief around her collar. And then she had earrings or she had bracelets or she had an anklet or something. And basically you were the homework was that you were supposed to go through and pick this woman apart to find these alleged eye traps. And then you find out that, they're saying, oh, the kerchief is an eye trap because it's drawing attention to her bosom. And
Mhm.
this jewelry, this adornment is an eye trap because it's drawing attention to her, you know, to her wrist. And some men find, wrist it not exactly like that, but you get the idea of just
Yeah.
like they're picking apart this woman to to basically say that, oh, if you're not dressed in a certain way, then you are going to lead men into temptation. And your body, basically, the message that I internalized as a young woman was
Yeah.
that my body was inherently sexual and dangerous, which, as you can imagine, can
A little bit
cause some
of
image issues.
yeah, no doubt. Well, it may come as no surprise to you, but I'm not a woman, and um, I am learning so much as I've left faith and started to kind of reevaluate my um position about just thinking about all of that kind of stuff, just and start thinking about things that I was taught. And then and I have two girls, so 2 girls and a boy, and whenever I had daughters, like my whole world kind of changed a whole lot. But I didn't think of them um like, oh, are they going to be a danger to society with how they dress? Uh, but it did make me realize things about maybe how society looks at them, or at least since I was still a believer and in church and things like that. I mean, of how those perceptions were hanging around, and I could see.
Mhm.
Would you say that it led to issues? Like, is it body issues? Is it issues of self worth? Um, I don't know how did that manifest in you?
So I think the way that manifested, and this is, I don't, so I'm not going to speak for my sisters, but I will just say that I don't think that there is a coincidence that we all experienced these sorts of messages growing up. And then most of us went on to have some type of eating disorder.
Oh,
Um, so how that manifested for me personally was an eating disorder.
hmm
And but then just consciousness of, I think the most problematic thing, though, I think even bigger than the eating disorder, dare I say, which that has been incredibly challenging to overcome. But I think the most damaging thing was just how it made me center men, how it made me center,
Mm,
men's thoughts about me, or, just how men perceived me, even just basically, like, just kind of almost having a hyper awareness of how I was being perceived. And then, experiencing a lot of guilt, like,
mhm.
if somebody were to make a comment to me about, "Oh, well, you're dressed inappropriately." I really internalized a lot of that, even when I left the church, and I no longer, subscribed to a lot of those kind of ideas and stuff, that stuff doesn't just leave you, because it's indoctrination.
Yes, it is.
And it's a long, especially for me, since I grew up that way and I didn't know anything else. I mean, obviously we had friends in our periphery who were less strict, but they were still Christian. They still subscribed to purity culture. They still subscribed in some form or another to modesty culture. I think, going back, I think that the dressing thing in particular was one way that my parents kind of exerted control specifically over the girls, to whether or not
Yeah,
they knew that that's what was happening. And I think that aspect of it too, and just in comparison with how my brother was raised, um, uh, just for example, like, when my brother was an older teenager, my parents, like 16, 17, my parents did not know where that boy was. But, with me and my other sisters, it was very much like, where are you? Who are you with? Let me see what you're wearing. So there was always this kind of just this aspect of, they've created so much focus on our bodies and stuff like that, that
yeah.
it just it's just something that really sticks with you.
Yeah, you're giving me things to think about because I've ran into the types. I'll just say that much. I've never been that way. My wife just dresses like normal. I mean, dresses and things of that nature. And, maybe sometimes she shows a little too much clavicle. I get it. But she did have someone come up to her once that was more like what you're talking about, and say something to her in a Walmart. And
Oh my
that was an
goodness.
interesting discussion that we had later about, like, what the hell. But it makes me, I have a hard time, but I'm coming around to trying to be understanding that indoctrination is just so hard to break. And these people have it, these, including myself, have it beat into us.
Mhm.
And you don't really realize how insidious it is whenever it,
Mhm.
it gets into you. Because if it's day by day, week by week, you have this kind of just balloon, around you, that makes you think that this is how you're supposed to be because this is the right way. And it's really hard to break. And it's hard, but I still struggle with, like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, why why would you
Mhm.
think that? But so you give me things to think about, which is good. This is why I ask questions, right? So oh, well, I'm sorry about that, because it's just, I think guys have also not helped, honestly,
No, you know what? And it's interesting how much of that has seeped into just mainstream culture too, because, even outside of, and this was very difficult to deal with, especially coming out of that, because although I intellectualized that that specific teaching was wrong, and that it was really harmful to women,
Mhm.
harmful to our self-esteem, harmful to our self-image. And of course I could see that what it had done to me personally, but even outside of these religious groups, you still have, men and women who subscribe to patriarchy, for example, that are still policing people, even though they're maybe not part of a religious group, but they're still,
Yeah.
because purity culture, because modesty culture has seeped into policing women's bodies, specifically has eked into our culture. I found that even when I got out of that, that there were other people, secular people, who were then policing my body and
Mhm.
telling me that, oh, you shouldn't dress like that. You're, like saying things like, oh, you're asking for it, or,
Yeah.
things of that nature. So it's extremely pervasive even outside of Christian circles, I found, which is
Yeah.
just that blows my mind.
It's just zeitgeist. I think it starts somewhere and then it expands and then eventually it gets embraced in full and then at some point there's a rebellion.
Mhm.
Right. So what happened after the seminar with the pamphlets?
So after the seminar, my parents were pretty hooked on it. They really enjoyed it. And basically they were like, and of course, the one thing I would say is like Bill Gothard is a pretty charismatic guy. I think he follows a very typical pattern of men that we see specifically in these kind of religious circles where, they have this high energy. Um they have this certainty that just makes people feel at ease, like, oh, this guy's got this figured out. He's got this
Mhm.
whole blueprint. And of course, the materials, I'm sure to my parents looked like, especially coming from their backgrounds, they both came from homes of abuse. And one way that I've been able to kind of have a little bit of compassion, although I have not repaired my relationship with my dad, that's his choice. I did repair my relationship with my mom. And one of the things was, her just kind of being able to say, like, we screwed up. Like, we did get in too deep with
Wow.
stuff that wasn't good for our family, that was too extreme.
Mhm.
Um, and speaking specifically about the Institute for Basic Life Principles and Bill Gothard, um, because, he subscribed to this very like, everybody's under God, the husband's under God, the wife is under the husband, the children are under. So it's like this umbrella model of authority, patriarchal
Yeah.
authority.
I wonder where
And
patriotism falls in that hierarchy. I mean, because it would definitely be God first, and then would it be head of the household or would it be the flag? I'm not quite sure which ones, or maybe they're equal at some point. I don't know.
I in that model specifically for IBLP, even I don't even think that they had country on there at all, but which is interesting because they were very heavily like Christian nationalists. Like
Right.
they were pushing a Christian nationalist agenda. Um but so yeah, so through the seminar we actually ended up joining IBLP, and what that kind of looked like was you then use their homeschool curriculum. So then my parents started integrating homeschool curriculum. They would use the wisdom booklets, which eh, you know it always makes me so mad thinking back to our education just in general, because my mom homeschooled all of us,
Hmm.
which was, homeschooling 11 kids. And she at least had a 2-year degree.
Yeah.
Um, but she was not equipped or trained to really educate us. And of course, we got the typical homeschool kind of unschool, experience in the curriculum with just completely false information.
Yeah. As
Um,
as homeschoolers myself, I have to tell the audience what unschooling is if they don't know. So
okay, yes,
homeschooling
please.
usually follows a curriculum of some kind. It may be secular, which is pretty much how we roll, or it may be faith-based of some kind, but unschooling's way different. It's
Hmm.
basically just go discover the world and see what you figure out, without necessarily a lot of guidance. There might be some guidance, especially if someone has a question. They come and they say, well, I don't understand, how does water turn to ice? I'm like, okay, well, let's dive into that a little bit. But it's never like, let's sit down and go through some materials and learn this and then go. It's basically just loosey goosey, right?
It
Loosey
very loosey
goosey.
goosey. And I mean, I would just argue like that in my personal opinion, it is neglectful. And I think that it should be considered child abuse, because if you are not providing your child with an adequate education, with factual information,
Yeah.
not the earth is 2,000 years old or whatever, whatever. It because, we just didn't learn certain things. Like, we were not allowed to learn about evolution. We had very whitewashed, curriculum.
Mhm.
I didn't know about the Trail of Tears until probably I was like at the point that I dual enrolled in high school. When I was 16, I dual enrolled at college, and I think that that's probably my first exposure to
Yeah.
uh, really like American history.
Oh, yeah, those terrible liberal colleges, right? Teaching you things like
Oh
history.
yes,
Yeah,
history.
yeah. I mean, evolution. I mean, I went to public school, but it just wasn't really something that really bubbled up. And then, whenever it started making its way into the culture wars within the church, then it became something that you didn't even poke around on the edges on your free time. And I recently talked about how that we were home just chilling and decided to watch the um, Young Sheldon TV show. It's on Netflix. It's reruns and stuff like that. But I never watched The Big Bang Theory because it's got the word Big Bang
Oh
Theory in it,
right.
I missed that honestly, and I'm still catching up. I still have a lot of catching up to do, but I'm trying my damnedest to learn. And are you in the same boat? Have you tried to or learn some things that you've never really known for the first time as an adult? Like evolution
Gosh,
science or anything like that?
I think that that's one of the things that I love now is the fact that I have been able to go back, and I think this has kind of been an important part of reparenting myself, because literally I really feel like I've had to reparent myself.
I like that.
Um that yeah, discovering like simple things that I just missed out on, because we did miss out on a lot of like pop culture things because we just weren't allowed to um we weren't allowed to partake. We were told that this is nope, that is stuff for the world, we don't need to be exposed to that. I mean, to the point that at some point when I was younger, my parents didn't even let us watch Disney movies because they said that there were demonic messages in there, um and that
Mhm.
we were going to be somehow led astray by Disney and
Yeah.
those evil media corporations, that they were trying to steal our souls.
And let's not forget
And I
about the
wish that that were
gays.
hyperbole. Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because Disney in the 90s was,
Yeah.
embracing the gays. And that was
They
just
did things
not.
like let them come into the park and have a
Oh my
good
gosh.
time, you
Mm-hmm.
know, probably at a reasonable price
Letting
back then
people
too.
in the park.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh goodness. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so how did you end up leaving? Uh,
So I ended up, I, I met my husband, when we were, well, let's see, gosh, so that we have where there's a 6-year age gap between us. So at the time that our families met, and our families just kind of happened to meet because when you live in a small town and you meet
yeah. Oh, yeah.
other large families, you just kind of gravitate. That's just how that happens. So someone was like,
Hmm.
"Oh, there's a new big family that just moved into town. You got to go meet them." So we ended up meeting that family, and then so I've known my husband for a really long time at this point.
Hmm.
But we didn't get together until he was already in the military for like 10 years, and yeah. But we met, we got married, gosh, I was married young. I got married when I was 21. Um so we've been married for quite a bit now.
But I bet you know
Almost
people that were
almost 13
married.
years.
Okay. Oh,
Oh my gosh.
congratulations.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, and here's the thing. Here's the sad thing about that. So, and one of the things that we have discussed as I have kind of started, as I deconstructed and stuff, one of the things that we kind of talked about was just like, gosh, I wonder if we hadn't been under so much pressure, if the trajectory of our marriage might have been different if we hadn't been facing so much pressure. Because at that point, I had lived on my own for a couple of years. I had come back to live with my parents, um, you know, out of just sheer desperation, hard times,
Hmm.
financially and otherwise.
I get it.
Um, so I'm living with my parents again. I have kind of repaired the relationship, to the extent that I can at that point. I still wasn't deconstructing at that point. I was in my early
Mm-hmm.
20s. And, you know, my husband and I ended up, starting to date. And then, yeah, at some point, things were obviously still strained with my parents because there was always just still that kind of that tension, that unresolved, all of that unresolved hurt and resentment, all of that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and at that point I was pretty much just like, you know what? We could just get married and I can just leave and then this will not be a problem anymore.
Right.
So, and that was kind of one of those things where it's just like I had already had three sisters who met guys and were like, "Oh, you're good enough. Let's get married and then
Yeah.
get me out of here." So
Mm-hmm.
that was almost like a form of escape. And at the time being 21 years old, I don't think I was really consciously thinking of it as like, "Oh, I'll just marry this guy and we'll get out of here." But, in some part of me, I think that maybe that was a part of my motivation because we were married within like a year, like not even a year of dating.
Oh,
Um, we
fast
we
mover.
eloped.
But
But
you'd
but
known each other a long time, so
oh
it's
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It was not
yeah,
like we didn't know each other.
yeah.
But that sounds kind of bad when I say it like but
I don't think so. I mean, I've heard all sorts of stories about people. They've been together for the longest time, and then they get married, and then it all falls apart.
yeah.
And then some people, well, like you maybe didn't date for very long, and then you've been married 13 years. So you
We
know,
we actually did get to date because basically at that time I was just like, if you guys try to make me do, because at that time my parents were still insisting on people doing courtship because that was a big
I
thing
was wondering
in
if there was
in
any kind
IBLP.
of
Oh
weird
yeah.
dating rules.
I missed that because I kind of was the one that got away and then I came back for a little bit. And I think my parents at that point were a little bit like, oh, we should probably just not push her because and the funny thing is my parents, didn't want me to be, they didn't want me to be, outside of the family. But at the
Hmm.
same time, they were so entrenched in what they were doing that it was just like, well, we can't let them get away with too much. But at that point, my now husband and I were like openly dating and, engaging in things that my parents were very upset about and, as young couples do.
Yeah.
And but then that started the pressure of just like, oh, well, with my mom telling me, oh, well, why would he buy the cow if he's going to get the milk for free? And I'm like,
Ugh.
well, first of all, mom, I'm not a cow. But
Yeah.
second of all, I was like, he already told me he's going to buy milk. So there.
There.
And, of course, my mom is just like, like
Yeah.
clutching her pearls.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, just please,
Yeah.
just be normal for once in your life.
Hmm.
But prior to that, my parents were very, very serious about this courtship thing. So I actually had two sisters that did go through courtship. Um, And, to their credit, they are both still married to their spouses.
Hmm.
So I'm glad it worked out for them. But I do remember a very weird conversation with one of my sisters where the way that her husband convinced my parents to move up their wedding date was to use a verse in the Bible. I think it was one of Paul's letters where Paul says that it is better for a man to be married than to burn. So I just remember hearing through the walls my soon to be brother in law talking about, oh, let's move up the wedding because I'm burning with lust for your daughter. And like, ooh, like,
Right.
can we not?
Yeah, I've learned some interesting things about that passage and just that mindset within the last few months. Just some of the information that I take in. Maybe it's wrong. But hear me out. The idea being that Jesus was coming back soon. Paul thought that Jesus was coming back soon. Therefore, it would be better for you to deal with this now and just go ahead and get married, rather than burn with desire, because Jesus is coming back soon. Soon being in my lifetime, which has happened now for centuries. And so then once I heard that, I was like, wow, that kind of makes me rethink everything. Like, so the Catholic Church's vow of celibacy,
Mm-hmm.
is it possible that that was a misunderstood scripture, that it was applying to first century, rather than 21st century? Um, it's very interesting. This is why I think it's important to encourage critical thinking and being skeptical and asking these questions
Yes.
about what you believe and why you believe it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's possible we have this wrong, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the things now that has become so clear to me, in deconstructing is just that, you know, there was just a lot of dogma and you weren't allowed to question it. You were encouraged not to think critically about it because if you asked questions, it was like, oh, are you not sure?
Mm.
And there was this kind of sense of like, oh, if you're not absolutely sure about what you believe, to the point that we even had people in our circles that would go through these kind of things with politicians they were interviewing, um, to just decide whether or not they were going to vote for them. They would make them go through this, like, do you believe there's an absolute right and wrong? And what is that? And what's your standard for that? And it basically was a gotcha because if the candidate didn't answer, oh, the Bible, and yes, I believe that, morality is black and white, then that would
Right.
kind of just be like disqualifying. But it's when I look back and I think about all of these people, the one thing that does really stick out is just this it's a lack of critical thinking. It's because you can't think critically about it. And
Hmm.
then it's just this acceptance of a lot of like theology and doctrine that they can't even explain and their pastor can't even explain. Because a lot of these, some of these preachers were just complete like lay people, right? These are just
Right.
people who have convinced an entire group of people, oh, hey, we got the secret sauce. We got the right answers. We got the right theology. We've got the right doctrine.
Right.
We're absolutely sure. And I think that that's why it's really attractive to people, especially people with like traumatic past, like, people
Hmm.
who are searching for meaning and belonging. That's why it's so
Right.
attractive, especially to
Exactly.
people like my parents, because it was like they didn't have a place to belong. And then they found this group and, they were told like, oh, you're going to be a little bit of the prosperity doctrine kind of going on where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
you're going to be healthy, wealthy, and wise if you just do all these things and give your life over to God. And for them, I think that that was, kind of just this like, oh, okay, we can just shut this off
Right.
and then we can just do what we're told. And then we're just going to
Hmm.
have this great life with this beautiful family and everything's going to be great.
It's gonna be great. It's paradise on heaven on earth, right? Which
Yes.
seems weird. Why am I trying
I
to
mean,
make heaven on
really?
earth? I mean, there's
Yeah.
so many contradictory things that always kind of go back and forth. Like, is Satan powerless, or does he have power over the earth? And am I trying to store up treasures in heaven, or am I heading down a prosperity gospel path? But at the same time, Jesus said to the rich young ruler to, give away all your possessions and follow me. And
Hmm.
there's so many contradictory things that eventually your brain just kind of melts and kicks off a deconstruction for some people. So is there any one thing besides the patriarchy that started your deconstruction, or was it, I don't know, you tell me.
So I would say that I kind of hit a wall. So I after my husband and I got married, we we decided that we were going to not wait to have kids and we wanted to start a family immediately. Um, because that's one of the only things I've ever been super sure about is having kids.
Right.
Initially I wanted 5 kids, but we settled at 4 because that is good enough.
Yeah.
But um I have always just kind of had, and I don't know, I've just always had a heart for children. I love everybody's children. Which is crazy because some children are not very lovable, but here I am.
Hmm.
So we started having children, and I think it was really just that being in that postpartum period, there was something about that, and some people
Mm.
refer to it as matrescence, where it's just like it's a it's a breaking down and rebuilding that's really intense
Yeah.
in that postpartum period. And I started going through that, and I think that that just kind of ended up being a catalyst for me ending up in therapy, ending up on medications because I was really struggling with my mental health, and then
Yeah.
finally kind of starting to open up about my childhood and just how I was raised. And then realizing, when somebody is sitting there looking at me telling these stories and just like horror, like, I mean, therapist face is not even just like they are looking at me like, holy shit, like, this is like
This is
this is
bad.
bad.
Yeah.
And it really just took someone being like, I am so sorry that that happened to you. That is really traumatic. And then me
Hmm.
going, are you what? Like, are you sure about it?
Right.
But I think deep down, though, for me, I had always known how we grew up was not okay. But I had suppressed all of those feelings for so long that it actually started manifesting as like physical illness and mental illness.
Yeah.
And that's where it started. And then, once I started opening up and talking about it, then I started to realize like, oh, this was actually really bad. And then, but it really just took somebody being able to be kind of like a container and being able to hold everything that I was telling them and
Hmm.
reflecting it back and going, that's not normal. That's not okay. None of this should have ever happened to you. You shouldn't have been treated like that. You know, and it really took someone just kind of telling me the truth to my face for the first time about about what I was sharing with them. And then me kind of starting to process it. And let me tell you, that process, there were several times the way that I felt emotionally during that time of kind of starting to process all of that trauma, realizing that I had chronic PTSD from, childhood abuse and neglect and,
Right.
all of that, then I started realizing, oh my gosh, it's this toxic system. This is because then somebody, kind of was like, that's religious abuse. That's religious indoctrination. So, it took people naming things and then me being able to take those and look at, oh, yeah, like when you tell a child that they just have to think what you think and they can't think anything else, they can't ask questions, and you are prescribing them a way of living that's so rigid and so set. And there's no because there was never an option for me to be gay. There was never an option for me to not marry a man. There was never an option for me
Hmm.
to not be a mother. There was never an option for me to have any other sort of life than the life that my parents told me that I could have, that the church told me that I could have. So
Right.
I think, once that all got stripped bare, that for me was just kind of like, oh, it's this system. This system is toxic. This
Hmm.
this this sect of religion is toxic. Maybe all religion is toxic because at some point I think I would have considered myself an atheist at some point,
Hmm.
like along this journey, because I was just like, Jesus, ew, no, immediately no. God, no, absolutely not.
Right.
Like,
Um, I think nothing is more interesting or more powerful than an individual's ability to focus the mirror on themselves, uh, and to really get really critical about themselves. And so I applaud you for doing that and for being able to have a safe container to be able to, you know, let somebody else take it, and then I'm going to look at it and I'm going to stare at that reflection that's coming off of, I'm going to pretend your emotions and everything is just a liquid in this container, and you're looking at it and you're like, I really have to reevaluate all of this, because it's so easy to just go along with what you're told,
mhm,
and it's so very difficult to say, I think I'm going to choose a different path for myself, and because that's power. That really is. Once you can start to crack the mind a little bit, um, I mean, it's one thing to lift weights, right? I mean, because 100 pounds is 100 pounds, but that's a Henry Rollins quote. I don't know if you're familiar with that quote. No, I'll
I
try to
don't think
find it.
so.
Okay, I'm gonna mark this. I'm gonna try to put it in the show notes because it's long. Henry Rollins was a singer, but he's got a great quote about the gym. Anyway, But it's another thing to deal with the mental weight, because those are often a lot heavier, I think.
I tell people like, and I think this is why I'm able to have compassion on some level for even people like, well, I mean, even like I have family members who are very heavily entrenched in the MAGA movement.
Hmm.
And, that's a source of grief for me because I feel like I've kind of lost some of my family to that.
Right.
And, but even so, I'm kind of able to have a level of empathy for them that other people might not, just because, for
Yeah.
my siblings, at least, my siblings don't know any different. They don't know any different than being raised in those groups, being indoctrinated. And, but here's where the accountability has to kick in. It's like we all became adults and we all had a choice at some point. We all had a choice. I can either continue doing what I'm doing, what I've always been, what I've always done, what I've always been told, and I can stay the same, or I can start to look and see like how this is harming my marriage. This is harming my children. Um, you know, my acceptance of these things without any questions is weighing on me in a way that I can't fix if I'm not willing to actually look at it and go, is this serving me or is this hurting me?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. And there were times when I honestly, like, it was so heavy, emotionally and mentally, processing all of that, deconstructing, that I just was like, oh my gosh, like, God, if you're real, just like take me because I can't do this anymore. So at
Yeah.
points it's very intense. And I really understand, like, I understand that people don't know what's on the other side because at one point I was on the other side and I didn't know what was on the other side. And it was so scary that I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know what's going to happen when I jump. And,
Hmm.
I obviously did jump, but even still, I mean, I lost things along the way. I lost relationships along the way.
Yeah.
I had to deal with people calling me a heretic or calling me, oh, well, you've just lost your way. You're not a Christian anymore. And you just, blah, blah, blah. Like all of these, things that we hear when people, leave the church.
Yeah.
It's very manipulative, but it hurts, because
It
that
does.
was your group. And then now you're on the outside of it and kind of what they told you to fear, which when you're in the group they really you don't want to get on the outside of the group because you don't know what's out there and it's going to get you and it's going to be ugly and you're going to lead a miserable life. And yeah, like, and to some extent, when I was deconstructing and I was really having a hard time, I did have family members who'd be like, see, this is what's happening because you've rejected God. Now you have bad mental health and you're struggling and all of this. And
Oh.
this is evidence that, that you're outside of God's favor and things like that. So there was a lot of like manipulation
Because
and
bad things.
gaslighting.
Right. Yeah. Because bad things
Right.
never
Because
happen
bad
to
things never
people.
happen.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. But it's
Uh,
just that you have to deal with all of that kind of like mind stuff that it's just, and
I'll say it. It's a mind fuck. I get
yeah,
it.
okay, can I say that? Yeah, it's a mind fuck.
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
Mind fuckery is what it is.
Yes. There's a reason why I have the explicit on the podcast, is because you should say what the fuck you want to, because
Great.
you were probably held back long enough. So, where are you today with thoughts of this? I'm waving my hands.
Oh, it's complicated.
Yeah.
I love the idea of Jesus as a man that, and not necessarily because, to be quite honest, the Old Testament God is an asshole. Like,
He's a little bit of
who
a monster. Yeah.
who drowns you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like
Oh, I
we're
know. I
talking
know.
about like, see, so I can't get down with that. But I do like the idea of Jesus specifically, like in the Sermon on the Mount, like, because I think if anything, the reason that I didn't fall down the alt-right MAGA pipeline was because I was like, oh my gosh, like, no, have y'all even read the Sermon on the Mount? That, like,
Hmm.
literally we had to memorize that as children. I memorized the entire Sermon on the Mount at one point, the
Wow.
Beatitudes. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was very impressive.
Mhm. Yeah.
um, but I internalized that. And
Yeah,
then to
exactly.
realize that the adults around me were just like, oh, feed the poor. Like, like just that
Mm,
they didn't take anything that Jesus actually said seriously, and that it was just kind of like, oh, well, yeah, like welfare queens and, like, um, uh, yeah, oh, just all of the culture war stuff
mhm,
specifically, where it's just like, y'all have completely lost the plot. You sat here and made me internalize these messages, and then you're not even, so if I think part of it too was just recognizing the hypocrisy and stuff. So
mhm.
I would hesitate to call myself a Christian, and mostly now just because of the climate.
Right.
um if people ask me, I still think that I kind of have a personal faith of some sort. What it exactly is, I don't really know, but it kind of just amounts to um loving my neighbor
Okay. I think that's a
and
good start. Great start.
treating
Yeah.
other people the way that they want to be treated, basically.
Mhm.
Which, is that biblical? No, not technically, but like where I get that idea from is still, I guess, from the Bible, but from the way that Jesus treated people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's okay to evaluate a lot of different ideas and take the best parts and discard the rest. I mean,
I
you
That's
you you
basically
know,
where we're at this point. That's basically
yeah,
where we're at this point.
I mean, I've I I have to question so many things that I've been told, or at least been led to believe that about other people that were not even Jesus, like
Hmm.
Gandhi. I've heard that Gandhi was a bad person. I've heard MLK Jr. that he was a womanizer, and some of those things may totally be true. Um, and then there's probably some other, but then there's other things. I mean, passive resistance is really interesting to me. Just get a whole bunch of people to do nothing and then wait till the other side flinches. I mean, that's basically how we got unions, right? I mean, that's not a bad thing. You causes
Right.
change, nonviolent change, which is so powerful. It's like, wow, you guys did nothing and caused change. Cool. I mean, because we've done enough killing. I think, and if there's a new way, that let's try it. But you know, I these are just things you're going to be questioning, but at least you're asking the questions, right? Rather than being fed something and everybody's got a different opinion about the same
Hmm.
damn book.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean,
Yeah.
at least here and how we were raised. Now if we were born somewhere else, it'd be a different book with different rules, but it's kind of the
Hmm.
same. It's the same mindset.
It
So
really is.
so what's the future look like for you? I mean, you're doing the lifting thing, you're doing a part-time job, you're raising kids and a dog and a cat and a husband.
Oh, future things. Gosh, so I don't know. I mean, like, I really like the idea of, I do kind of keep active on social media and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I don't have a huge following, but I wouldn't hate it, if I kept talking about some things like just how we kind of came together on Threads. It's just,
Yeah, yeah.
finding like-minded community and talking about
Mhm.
things. And so I dabble in that a little bit on social media. But I mean, other than that, we're kind of in a crazy season of life with like young kids. So I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not super ambitious at this point.
What's your
But
range? Like low to high, what's your range?
11 all the way down to 3.
Oh, yeah,
So
you
we
are
are
in
we
it.
are still in the trenches. We are in the
Yeah.
trenches.
Yeah. So,
But
sorry.
I would love to get back into politics. I've done a couple of cycles here and there of like
Mhm.
campaign stuff, and eventually I would love to get back into working for candidates that I really. James Tallarico, this is kind of off base a little bit, but is running in Texas, and we lived in Texas. We came from Texas
Yeah.
to North Carolina,
Okay.
and he's a candidate that I'm really really excited about.
Yeah,
He's a pastor in the Austin area.
he
Um,
seems like a nice guy,
yep.
and seems to be very level-headed whenever it
Mm-hmm.
comes to his personal beliefs and then also his political
Yes.
beliefs. He seems to
Yes.
be like, oh, yeah, this guy sounds all right. I can't help but always be like but I'm reserving suspicion. But then again, you could do that with
Oh,
any, but
absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
but just because it's politics.
Oh, yeah. I'm
And
absolutely skeptical of most people who are politicians because I think a lot of people just get into it for their own self-aggrandizement.
yeah,
Um,
I
yeah.
would love
And,
to see acceptance of non-religious candidates. I
oh,
mean, right
absolutely.
now you
Yeah.
almost have to declare something just to run.
You really do.
And,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it would be great to just someone say like, I don't believe any of that stuff, but I do
Mhm.
believe that we should treat everybody equally and with dignity. And
Right.
well, can we all agree on that and go from there? And maybe we get to a point where we don't have political parties. But I I have my head in the clouds right now. I get that. So we are not there. We are nowhere close to there. But I think people want. I think there's an appetite for maybe
I do.
putting away.
I think culture is shifting, in
Yeah,
that regard, very obviously very slowly.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, there is really nothing that fires me up more than just being on a good campaign with a good candidate and
uh-huh.
kind of digging into that. So, as the kids get older, I would love to dip my toes back into that, but we'll see.
Yeah. It is. I helped out with a campaign once with a friend of mine, former roommate, and he ran for a state office. And I got to tell you, it was pretty addictive. I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the communication the messaging aspect of it. I really enjoyed what we were trying to communicate. Um, but it was a little consuming though. So I understand that whenever
It can
you're,
be pretty intense. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it can be pretty intense. I did
yeah,
one cycle in Texas when we lived in Texas. Actually for Beto O'Rourke.
hmm
And yeah, I loved it, but
hmm
my caveat would be that I would never do that again with young children just because
no,
it can be really consuming and I found that really difficult to balance.
yeah.
So
I bet. Well, this has been a wonderful discussion, and I look forward to continuing to read your. You've been on a little bit of a tear lately, and I've enjoyed it. It's been great. You know, just you
been
just don't
feeling a little salty.
right.
Been feeling
Been
a little
feeling
salty.
salty. It's all right. Let that salt out. That's great. So well, thank you so much, and thank you for spending time with me today.
I appreciate it. No, thanks for having me. This was a good chat.